Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be here today with Daniel, and he'll be presenting on behalf of his co-authors Sebastian and David about their article that just came out in the June 2024 issue of the Journal of Advertising Research. It's titled Musical Manipulation of Visual Scenes in Video, Film, and TV Advertisements, a large-scale investigation into the implicit effects of sonic branding. And I'm super excited to have Daniel here. He's an expert on the effect of sound and how people respond to that. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So to start off, I'm guessing some people who are listening may not have read the article that has come out yet, your article. So could you give us a little bit more information into what it is you looked at and what were some of the, most important findings you came across or found?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of the article was to find out what music really means emotionally and semantically when used in advertising and sonic branding. And one traditional way of going about this that's been used in the industry for a long time is just to play a piece of music or a track to participants and ask them to rate this track on a list of attributes, and then to get a profile and see what that means to people. But in fact, we know that music is something that works quite emotionally with people, and many viewers or listeners are not really aware of the effects of music when they see a commercial or an ad. You consume the music in the background, and the music adds to the emotional perception of the ad and of the brand, but you're not actually aware of what the music is contributing to your perception. So music works in this sphere or realm that Daniel Kahneman called System One, which is our emotional system of processing and decision making. So we thought if this is true and music appeals to this emotional system of processing, we need a test to get at this. We can't ask people to explicitly and consciously
Right.
go through a list of attributes because they'll be overthinking it. And then personal preferences come in and as confounders, and people will have their genre preferences and so forth. We want something that gives us a more immediate and direct uh, message or image of what the music is doing with people and how is it appealing to people. So we thought, let's design an implicit test of the emotional and semantic content of music. And the one trick that we did is to apply a paradigm that's been used in music psychology for a long time. It was initially actually used to investigate the effects of film music. So we showed people the same videos, but with different music tracks in the background, and then looked at how different tracks might change the perception of what they see. So this is something that we all know from film music research, right? That you have a visual scene, and depending on what type of music you have in the background, it could be either a love scene, or it could be suspense, and there's something happening around the corner, or it could be a really jolly, happy scene. And the music communicates what we should be feeling in that minute. And that's exactly what we were trying to exploit here, this effect of well-known effect of film music. So what we did is we found a battery of ambiguous videos that could be interpreted either way, right? So it's either a couple kind of fighting or a couple kind of playing. You don't really know unless you get an emotional cue. And we have nature scenes and scenes of animals, and they can be threatening or they can be soothing, really very ambiguous visual scenes. And then we put different tracks in the background, and then ask participants only about what they see, how they interpret what they see. And from comparing what one group of participants told us in terms of their interpretation with this music in the background to another group who had a different track in the background, we could then see how much can the music sway people towards one perception or to another perception. And we did this with a large battery of ambiguous videos and a large battery of sonic brand tracks that had been used or produced by a brand agency. And then came to a test that actually, where we said, look, these are 10 videos that work particularly well with different music in the background. And here we have a database of tracks that tells us how much a powerful piece of music can move an interpretation of a brand or is seen towards powerful. And this is basically what this article describes, the construction of this implicit test of emotional semantic content of music in advertising and branding.
That's very cool. Yeah, it sounds like a very interesting, series of studies to go through and do as well too, looking at these different, perceptions you get from the audio.
Mhm.
Cool. So, moving to the next question then, like, what does this mean for advertisers? What do you think are some of the key sort of takeaways advertisers, reading this article or looking at this research should be gathering from it?
Well, I think the first message is the type of music you use in a campaign really matters. So often it's the last thought. So the video has been shot, the ad is in the cutting room, and then someone says, "Oh, we need some music," and this is often an afterthought. And I would say music can have a large effect on brand perception and what you see in an ad, and it should be one of the first considerations, along with the general message and campaign design. What kind of music do I want to use with it, and where can I use music? So that would be my first recommendation. Please take music seriously in advertising and make use of sonic branding. And then the second point for practitioners, I think, is if if you are then faced with a choice of, say, 5 to 10 different tracks that all could work with your ad and could work with your brand, uh, how do you know which one is the best one? And this is the time where you can actually use rigorous quantitative testing. So ad pre-testing has been around for a long time, but often it's only the visuals that get pre-tested. But I would say it's equally important to pre-test the music and the sonic assets as well. And that can be done in isolation. So before you add even the brand name or the ad, or it can then be done in combination with the finished ad, and you see how much a specific track can enhance the perception of the ad that you've shot. And then you still have a choice. Do I want to license this track or this track? Do I want to get a famous artist who might pull with his name or her name? And you know how much of an emotional effect will this particular track have? And this should be part of the decision mix, I think.
Hmm, that's very important. Yeah. No, it's interesting they have it put together that way as well too, right? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So I know you've been doing a lot of work. Obviously, your entire career is looking at the effect of audio. So I'm curious, like, what drove you to do this particular study?
Um, so I think it was more a chance encounter. So I've been working on and off with a pre-testing company called Sound Out in London, and
Hmm.
they initially they specialized in pre-testing music for radio. So which hit single should be the first one from this album, which tracks work best for our playlist and our audience. And over the last 10 years or so, they were slowly moving into sonic branding and advertising. And they approached me at some point and said, look, we're not quite happy with the way we are testing the effects of music in branding and advertising. Do you have any ideas how we can make this more implicit and more towards the system one, the emotional effects that music have? And then we applied for a grant from the British government and got it. And this gave us the chance to do this properly and investigate this properly and develop this implicit test for the emotional semantic content. So we had, and that's unusual actually, we had quite a bit of time and we had quite a bit of money to invent, develop. Some ideas weren't good we had at the beginning and they went into the bin, and we then had the time to really find the best or optimal solution. Also in terms of the statistical analysis that you need to disentangle the effects of video and audio and attribute as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, always good to have a grant too. Never hurts to have money to use for the research either.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's often the other way around, right? That people from the industry approach me as an academic and say, oh, we need some solution, but actually we need it by next week because the client needs this and that.
Right. Yeah.
And then you do hand wavy ad hoc stuff. But this time around, there wasn't that commercial pressure, but we had the time to really explore and experiment with different paradigms.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Get the methodological, contribution as well as the findings you have as well too. That's very
Mm.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
The other big question I always ask, and I think it's really important, especially for early stage researchers, is talking about the challenges you might have encountered with your research. I think a lot of times we see papers come out and they just look so beautifully done, right? As they often do once they've gone through the process, and sometimes we don't really know about the challenges that might have been involved in doing that. So were there any involved in your particular article? And if so, could you talk a little bit about what they might have been and how you overcame them?
Um, I think the first challenge was really to find the right idea and the right paradigm that we wanted to try. So what kind of experimental trick or paradigm setup do we want to use? And at some point, then we found this idea around film music and their effects. So I think that was obviously we did some systematic research, but it's lucky that we found something that turned out to work in the end. And then we gathered a lot of data together with SoundOut. They manage a huge market research panel, mainly specialized in music and audio, and was data from almost 1 million participants that rated these different ambiguous videos with different tracks in the background. So we had more than 2,000 experimental conditions. So this is really large in terms of experimental psychology. Normally, you have like 2 or 3 conditions that you compare against each other. But here we knew we wanted to cover the breadth of music, but also the breadth of visual content that might be possible. And it took a while to collect that data. I mean, with an online panel, obviously it's much quicker and you couldn't do this kind of
Mm.
research in the lab. But yeah, it still took a while to pre-process all this data. There's a lot of quality control that you need for internet data as well. And it took quite a while to set up this processing chain from raw data coming in to this is really usable data that tells us something that has information in it. I think those were the main challenges, and then it went really well. And with my 2 collaborators, Seb and Dave, they were fantastic on the project, and they helped to really bring this to close.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So just a lot of like setup and testing to kind of find the right things to work with. Oh, makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. A lot of experimenting, trying this, trying that, and at some point, it had some dynamics of its own, and one thing led to another, and finally, we knew what we wanted to do and what we wanted the test to look like.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But as you say,
And then
in hindsight, it always looks easier than it was at the beginning, where at the beginning you see the problem, but you can't imagine what the solution would be. But now looking back, it all looks very logical, and that's the way we've written it up in the paper. But this is not necessarily the way it was conceived. But there was a lot of trial and error ongoing here and there before we finally everything came together.
I think it's good to know. I think especially like I remember being much more junior and just sort of looking at these papers and they look so polished and it's
Mhm.
amazing that they've had a perfect vision but there's a
Yeah,
lot of effort that goes into it as well too. So it's nice to respect that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. And then final sort of question I want to talk around is where to next, right? Like what other avenues do you see, as being fruitful in this area? People that
Mhm.
might be excited by it, or other sort of general topics, that might exist around this. Like what would you see more research needed in this space? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are 2 questions that would lead on directly from this project. One is about other functions that music might have. So music obviously has the function to bring emotional content to branding and advertising. But with music, and particularly with sonic logos or jingles, music can also have the function to act like a memory aid. So you hear a certain
Hmm.
sequence of notes or a jingle, and you're immediately reminded of this is the brand or this is the product, just because it's like an earworm. It kind of lives with you, and it immediately reminds you of the brand. And this kind of memorability of short melodies or sonic sequences is something that's really interesting, and that we, at the end of this project, that we started to explore as well. So in addition to the emotional content, the bits of melody that people use in advertising music, how memorable are they, and how can you best investigate what will stick with people and what will kind of stay with them, because that can be really, really useful if a
Yeah.
melody stays with the consumer and they're constantly reminded of the brand when they hear associations to this melody.
Yeah,
So
that'd
that would
be
be
very
one
interesting.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. The
No, this
memorability
is yeah.
of music. And it's something that's also really has been a much investigated topic in music psychology, or basic psychology as well. So what makes things memorable, and things as intangible as melodies? How can we, in quantitative, really hard terms, can we describe what makes a melody memorable? And using advertising jingles or sonic logos is, I think, is a very good playground, because they're short, they form almost a genre on its own, and they're commercially relevant
Hmm.
to a whole industry. So this is an area that I like to explore more, and we've just have a paper written up that I hope will be a first step towards this goal. The other
Oh, that's
question
awesome.
then, and people from the marketing industry might wonder about that. So changing the emotional content is fine, and increasing memorability is fine, but does this actually lead to a different purchase behavior? So can we
Hmm.
actually measure these effects also on return on invest, for example, what we put in with the music in terms of licenses, in terms of music composing and editing? Do we get this back in the end on our campaign? And this is something that is harder to measure, because you would need to have access to company data and to actually revenues, and compare campaigns with and without sonic identities. And this is something that I'm currently working with on together with a company called AMP, a sonic branding company. And they're really interested in this question, because they get asked by clients, so what does it really matter? Why should I spend so much money with you, my dear music consultancy company, if
Right.
I don't know
Yeah.
whether this will actually pay off? And this would be really the holy grail to show how much music is worth in terms of the money you save or you can earn from it.
Yeah, that would be very impressive to be able to quantify. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, some very neat research you're working on. I'm very excited to see that when you get that ready to, submit, or, have that published. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to these bits of research coming out, and maybe communicating about these with other people in the industry as well.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking the time today to tell us more about your paper, and all the work that went into it, and the neat insights you've got from that. It's again available in the June 2024 Journal of Advertising Research issue. So thank you
Mhm.
again for being on today, Daniel. Yeah,
Thanks very much, Colin. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
And you. Bye.